so moving over to video number 2, so I'm just carrying on talking about functioning, labels and the debate around them, and how we talk about functioning labels and things like that. What I was saying is, I was saying that, or trying to say, although maybe going off a bit on tangents, is that I think that for most autistic people who are actually disabled and struggling in various ways, comparisons to other autistic people are going to always only be relative. So it depends what other autistic person you're with. Some people with Asperger's will be lower functioning than me, in the sense that some people with Asperger's won't even be able to cook meals for themselves. So to put it this way, there'll be some people with Asperger's who can't work, who can't work and can't have friendships or relationships like me, but they might also not be able to cook for themselves, or they might not be able to do YouTube videos, for example, or they might not be quite so articulate. So in those areas, obviously, I function higher than them, by a margin, because otherwise we're probably pretty similar if we can't work and stuff, which I would say is probably one of the biggest. I would actually say not being able to work is actually one of the biggest indicators of your functioning, actually, because not being able to work is a massive handicap, particularly in today's society. But all I'm saying is it's all relative, and there'll be some people in that lower functioning group of Asperger's. And I actually say that anyone who can't work and who has Asperger's is by definition in a lower functioning group of people with Asperger's, because if you can't work, that's a massive functioning thing you can't do. So all people with Asperger's who can't work are basically, I was saying, a lower functioning group. But obviously there are degrees of that lower functioning. And I would say that at least I do have some functional abilities. But I could say, but there could be, say, another person with Asperger's, and I know some, because like a group I go to, and we're all very different. So I could say there's one person with Asperger's who I know who can't cook for herself at all. In that respect, I have more functional skill than her. She can't cook for herself at all. But she is quite competent at paperwork, and she's quite good at getting paperwork and doing that sort of thing. I can't do paperwork at all. So in that respect, she's more functional than me in that skill. It evens out, so that we're both actually about the same level in terms of our functioning, which is for Asperger's, we're both pretty low functioning. But what we can do is going to be different. So in some areas I'm more high functioning than her, in other areas she's more high functioning than me. But it equals out, as we both can't work and are more or less similar in that regard, that we're both at a similar level of functioning, and we're both pretty low functioning when it comes to Asperger's, okay? But like I said, there'll always be people who are more low functioning than we are who have Asperger's, is what I'm saying. So it's all relative in that respect. I would say that a lot of people with Asperger's are kind of like somewhere in the middle, so they're not like high functioning and they're not low functioning. In that group of people, I would include people who can work, but whose work is kind of like maybe supported employment, or they need a lot of support to do it. Or maybe it's work that's beneath their skill set. A lot of people with Asperger's can work, but they might not be in low-paid jobs because they can't work to what they're capable of. So what I'm trying to say is they might have like really high qualifications at university or degree level, college qualifications, university qualifications, but they can't get a job that's equal to what they've achieved, say, at university. So they might be doing quite sort of dead-end jobs. That's like a lot. Whereas if they didn't have Asperger's, they might be able to do jobs that pay them a lot more, whatever. So in a sense, they're not achieving quite what they might be capable of if it wasn't for their disability. So a lot of people with Asperger's can work, but their jobs are sort of beneath what they could be capable of if it wasn't for their disability. I would say these groups of people are sort of medium functioning. They're not like high functioning, but they're not low functioning. They're a bit more functional than me because they can still work and stuff. But I would say that a lot of them aren't actually really high functioning either. So it would be a mistake to call them unequivocally high functioning, just as it would be a mistake to call me unequivocally low functioning, even though I am fairly low functioning for someone with Asperger's. But like I said, I can at least cook, and I do have basic self-care skills and stuff, so in some areas I can function, and I can talk really well, so I can function in that way. So it's not like a binary. And indeed, I'd say for most autistic people it's not a binary, it's always relative. I would say, though, that once we get to people like Melanie Sykes, it becomes different completely. Once we get so it becomes almost a joke, these people are even autistic, if you ask me. Once we get to people like Melanie Sykes, who can basically do extremely successful jobs with like basically no real, what's the word for it, like they've managed to get really high up the ladder. Like even a non-autistic person would struggle to get that high up the ladder. They've done this with either no support, or if they did have support, it would be like really minimal, maybe from like friends or connections. And obviously if they did get support from friends, that shows they've got social skills anyway, because in order to make friends and stuff you need some social skill. They haven't, people like Melanie Sykes, as far as I'm aware, have never had support for social services. I mean, if she has, she's never talked about it. I somehow doubt it. She's basically done it more or less on her own 2 feet. Yeah, I know she talks about her struggles at school and blah blah blah. By the way, lots of people have struggles at school. I wouldn't say, from what it sounds of it, they were clinically significant. She's also managed to set up her own business. I mean, that requires a lot of executive skill. She's done that all in her own 2 feet as well. That's pretty hard. Yeah, I think I can say, without any qualms, that Melanie Sykes is extremely high functioning. I think when we get to people like that, we no longer need to be careful about using those words. I think for most autistic people, it's always relative. So as I said before, I might describe myself as fairly low functioning for someone with Asperger's, but with the caveat that there'll be people who are more low functioning than me, and with the caveat that actually in some areas I function quite well. But it's all relative. I would say that, like I said, so I couldn't, and yeah, it's relative, but I'll say that a lot of people with Asperger's, most of people with Asperger's actually, are probably somewhere in the middle of functioning, where they're not high and they're not low. And I'll say that most of the people with Asperger's who can work and maybe have a few friends are possibly in that middle functioning group, but they still might struggle a lot. But I'm talking about, although I say they're still relatively more high functioning than me in most areas that matter, but even if in some areas I'm more high functioning than them, the fact that they can work and stuff isn't I would say it depends. So I'm probably not making a lot of sense. What I'm trying to say is that I think the biggest areas of functioning, the way I define functioning, I mean we could define it in lots of different ways, but I think the biggest areas are work, independence, and your ability to socialise, and self-care skills. All of those abilities make up functioning. But I would say that, yeah, so it's like a whole big picture really, and like I say, some autistics might be able to work, but only with a lot of support, and if they didn't have the support then they might not be able to work. I would say that they're still fairly low functioning, because the very fact they need support to work, and if that support was taken away they wouldn't be able to work, suggests that they're fairly low functioning. If an autistic can work and can do that on their own 2 feet, even if it's really stressful for them, bear in mind it's also stressful for non-autistics, but the fact that they can do that, and particularly if they can do that while raising kids, then I would say, yeah, they're very high functioning. I think that's quite unequivocal then. Even if it turns out they might struggle with isolated areas such as cooking. I know there's one person who can work and has a really high-powered job, can raise kids on her own 2 feet. She does struggle a bit with cooking, and I have better skills on cooking than her in some ways. But the fact of the matter is, she doesn't, the fact of the matter is, she's 100% independent and can support herself and raise kids. When we're talking about autism, that definitely means she's more high-functioning than me, because autism is a social impairment, and I think that's how it's basically how we can talk about these things. So yeah, I'm probably not making a lot of sense, and I'm probably going around the bush quite a bit. I'm not entirely sure where I'm going with this one. I just was trying to think a little bit about functioning and whether or not we can use functioning labels and what they mean. I don't really know 100% myself because I'm still working it out. I think we can sometimes loosely talk about them when we're describing particular skill sets, but bearing in mind that for most autistic people it will always be relative. So we can only really talk about relatively low functioning or relatively high functioning. By the way, this person I was talking about earlier, who I said is relatively high functioning, Melanie Sykes is still more high functioning than she is, by the way. Melanie Sykes is probably as high functioning as you can get when it comes, although like I said before, I do sometimes have my doubts that Melanie Sykes is even autistic, because it's quite weird actually. She's got an autistic kid, so yeah, maybe she does have traits. I'm not denying that she might have traits. That's more than likely. But she went through all that time raising a kid without even knowing she was autistic. That's quite strange, because it's not like we don't know about autism anymore. Like, there's a lot of awareness about autism now, so that's quite strange. Like, surely she would have known about it. And it was only mentioned to her by an autistic person who basically said it to her that he thought she was autistic. And because they were both about to do a TV documentary about autism, I smell that here. It basically seems too kind of cushy, like, oh, if she can get diagnosed, then it will obviously look better for their TV documentary sort of thing. By the way, she went and got a private diagnosis, because obviously the NHS, she would not be able to get diagnoses on the NHS. She's not clinically significantly impaired. That's the thing. NHS is a lot tougher with their diagnoses. That's not to say that there aren't good private practitioners out there. There are, but it is a lot easier for like minimally impaired people to get diagnosed privately, as indeed that's what she did. Bearing in mind, she's a celebrity. She's got, and it's even more, I don't know, what's the word for it? Strange that Christine McGuinness got diagnosed with both autism, dyspraxia and ADHD. You'd think with someone with 3 conditions like that would be severely disabled. Because if you think about it, ADHD can be severe, autism can be severe, and dyspraxia can be severe. They often say if you have more than one developmental condition, you're basically more disabled. Christine McGuinness, she's married to like isn't it a racing car? What's his face? I don't watch racing cars, so I don't really know. But you know, she's married to that racing car person. She's got how many kids? She's got a lot of kids. Yeah, I know all her kids are autistic, so again, she might have traits. Fact is, she could raise her kids. Again, you know, she was a model. That's a really high-powered job. I mean, come on, man, come on. If she was autistic, it would be so mild, it's barely unthinkable. But to have, like, all those other conditions as well, and to be able to get diagnosed with it so easily, that's again because she's so rich. She can just go and, right, go to the doctor, ask for one, get another. If her doctor says no, I'll go to another. You know, it looks good on paper. You know, all celebrity, you know. But seriously, no, I doubt. I just don't see it. But anyway, thanks for watching.